Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, and we are here today to talk about brain health. If you want to keep your brain healthy and sharp for years to come, we've got some great news for you. What you eat and how you live can make a huge difference for your brain. So in this action hour, we're going to be with my dear friend, one of the world's top neurologists, Dr. Dean Sherzai, to look at how you can safeguard and even improve your brain with optimal nutrition, exercise, stress management, and social support. We're going to talk about some of the diseases that affect the brain, like Alzheimer's, and how you can avoid them, and simple actions you can take every day to optimize your mental clarity now and for decades to come. This is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community, and some of the questions I bring today will come from our Whole Life Club members. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. We're offering coaching and our own best insights. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding your specific healthcare realities and needs. Now, about our guest, Dr. Dean Sherzai, MD, along with his wife and fellow physician Aisha Sherzai, MD, are cutting-edge neurologists and brain science researchers. They're known as the brain docs. They are the best-selling authors of the books The Alzheimer's Solution and The 30-Day Alzheimer's Solution, the definitive food and lifestyle guide to preventing cognitive decline. Dean and Aisha are co-directors of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Loma Linda University, directors of the Healthy Minds Initiative, and co-creators of the Neuro Plan, which is a customizable brain health program that utilizes technology and neurological research to empower users to improve brain health. Dean, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here with you. You're definitely one of the people that we admire for your work, not just in the field of health and what you do for the community, and most importantly, how you're focused in translation. It's not just pushing some concepts, but to make sure that it sticks and really means meaningful change in people's lives.
Well, thank you, Dean. And I would be remiss if I didn't also add that through the work we've gotten to do together over the years, which I am so grateful for, I've gotten to know Dean and Aisha, and I consider them to be not just two of the most brilliant people on the planet, which they absolutely are, but also people of profound heart and integrity. Dean has been on a path for decades of looking at how he can help uplift human health and the well-being of our planet. And that's what his life is dedicated to. And Dean, it's such an honor to consider you a friend and to share in this conversation with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I want to jump in with some questions here. So your methods for preventing and even reversing the symptoms of cognitive decline are remarkably simple and accessible. And yet even then, a new program can seem overwhelming to someone who's just starting their healthy eating journey. So how do you recommend beginners start when they're undertaking new endeavors or projects? What do we know about brain research that helps us move from knowing what to do to doing what we know?
Yeah. I want to take a side road. It's a very, very, very important side road. One of my areas of interest and research has been cognitive behavioral therapy. As far as changing behaviors, or changing the brain, there are three things you can change: behavior, emotion, and thought. What we usually try to do is change emotions, which is nearly impossible because it's an amorphous thing that flows into other behaviors, into other emotions, into other realms, that gets catastrophized, it gets exaggerated, it gets diminished. It really is not a good thing to put a handle on. Yes, there are some things that can help you a little bit, but the most important areas to work on is behavior and thought. Thought is critical. Appropriate measured thought is important. So one of the things I ask people to start with is their thoughts. Okay, I want to change. What do you want to change? Let's define them specifically and measurably and meaningfully and in a way that has relevance to you. And once you take stock, it's critical. Once you take stock of nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, and mental and social activity, which are the critical things. And then another element, which is your own past medical problems, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, and things of that nature. Then you have one level of control. It's really simple. I want to make sure that people don't get overwhelmed, and this simplifies it. Once you do that, within that realm, take stock of which one is the easiest one to look at. And usually sleep is the hardest and exercise is the easiest. And usually we start there. And even there, we usually paralyze ourselves. I don't have the time. I don't have the space. I don't have the equipment. You know what's one of the most common thing we do in our communities, in our work, is watch a show and do steps while doing a show. Mm-hmm. There's a half an hour where you're actually counting steps and there's no space limitations. And by the way, doing steps to me is the ultimate super exercise. No trauma to the head, incredible energy usage. And it's one of the best things you can do, including legs exercise and everything else. So I want people to take stock and take a little time, not too much, don't get overwhelmed, and start breaking down the behaviors that you want to change. Because other than that, you really go into a plan, but it's not your plan. It's not your environment and limitations and opportunities making that plan. And it always distills down to the lowest denominator, which is your baseline habits, which were created many decades ago.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I was thinking recently about how any action, like the significance of it changes based on how meaningful it is to us. So, for example, if someone was on stage and they said, like, if I told you that the next person who speaks in this room was going to say their name and then give you $1 million if you could remember their name 5 minutes later, do you think you'd remember their name? I was like, yeah, everyone in that room is going to remember that name, right? And yet we so often forget names.
Yes.
Because it doesn't have that powerful significance to us. And so part of what I hear you saying is that when we land in why, like when the why is deep enough and meaningful enough, then it's very motivating.
Yes.
And I would suggest that there are kind of two aspects of why that I've been thinking about lately. One is that pain pushes, the other is that vision pulls. So, you know, the why of like, I don't want to die. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to get dementia. I've seen it happen in my family. That can be a powerful motivator for people. But the thing is that if you go on a healthy lifestyle and you lose a bunch of weight and you feel better, soon enough, your fears fade and they're not motivating you anymore. So you also need a vision of what's possible that calls you forward, right? And that's such a huge part of it, is like you're rooted in your dreams, not just your fears, right? And both are important, I think.
Absolutely. We did a meta-analysis, which we're very proud of, because all the scientists that did their work, they sent their data to us to look at cognitive activities and and brain resilience. Mm-hmm. It's published in PubMed in 2018. And the three things that came as a paraphenomenon, the paper itself had to do very wonky and data-driven and specific things. But the paraphenomenon that came out of it was the Venn diagram that had to do around purpose, or the why, complexity and challenge. The complexity and challenge we'll talk about later, but the why is the center. The purpose is the center. And even there, we have to be very careful, because we have to really make sure that the why is truly the why. And it's the why. There are many whys in our life. And as the philosopher said, everything we do is the is, and the thing that's important is the ought. The ought in this case is me wanting to learn to play the guitar, and you've heard how bad I play, and me learning, to dance, me learning to connect to communities across the world in ways that, that really have meaning across all communities, as many communities as I can. These are the whys. Where they come from is my history. Where I'm going is important. But also the third element in the why is, which whys do you take on so it doesn't become too massive? That one of the things that disconnects people is the why, which is out there, and the steps towards it. And if you don't connect those, it frays. So you said it perfectly. The why is critical. Then we take stock of the why and say, this is the one that is an achievable one that I'm going to start. Because once you create that first set of victories, that is literally the reason dopamine, everybody's talking about dopamine. My work at NIH for 2 years was dopamine. We actually literally infused apomorphine and all these dopamine dopamine-like molecules into the brain of Parkinson's patients or progressive supranuclear patients, and you saw behavior changes, not just movement change, but behavior changes, because dopamine is the behavioral aspect of it. But if we hope to do that, we have to create micro movements of success. Without that, again, so it seems a little complicated. I'll simplify it. Yours is perfect. The why, identify the why that's the lowest hanging fruit, create behaviors towards that to make sure it succeeds. And lo and behold, that becomes the foundation stone of the new building you're building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. And you work with SMART goals a lot. Can you define very briefly, at least, what a SMART goal is and what that acronym stands for?
I'm starting to create a new acronym, but but SMART is a part of it. But I'll tell you some of the other things. So
Great.
S is specific, M is measurable, and I'll tell you what each of these mean. A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time bound. There are different words for these things, but basically the same thing. S is specific, meaning I want to feel healthy. That's not specific. I want to reduce my cholesterol by 20 points. That's very specific. That's too specific, but that's basically it. I want to reduce my sugar intake by 50%, but that also actually takes in the M part, the measurable, 50%. That's a very specific, something that you can put your hands around. More importantly, it directs you towards measuring yourself, assessing yourself, and that word I keep using over and over again, taking stock of yourself. Mm-hmm. And often we're so overwhelmed with all these terminology. It's really looking at yourself, identifying the things that you need to do, see if they're SMART, meaning specific and measurable and achievable. If not, break them down further. Then take stock where you are now, and then incrementally increase them in ways that are achievable. Achievable meaning if you have never walked or ran and saying, I'm going to run the marathon next month.
That's You're going to have a painful month.
Yes, that's ridiculous. Yeah. What you could say is, I'm going to increase my walk from basically nothing now to 5,000 steps a day, or 2,000 steps a day for that matter. And that's as good as anything else, because if you create those incremental increases, it will take you to heights that you can't imagine. That's achievable. Relevant, is it relevant to your higher goals? Health, joy, all these aspirational goals. Is it relevant to that? Especially if it's to the health, which is a little more specific, because if you do things that are all over the place and they're not adding to the center core, after a while you lose a motivation. And T is time bound. Set times, set achievable, meaningful times to things. I'm going to start walking, and I'm going to get to the point where I'm comfortable with 2,000 steps a day in about a month. Once I'm at that point, I'm going to increase it to 3,000 steps. Those are time. But the other couple of things that I want to add to this is make sure that it's the lowest hanging fruit in your activity. Mm-hmm. Don't start with the highest thing. Start with the lowest, because once you start the beginning steps, then everything falls apart. It falls on top of that and creates more and more stackable behaviors. And the other one is make sure that you have the tools, or I call it's tooled. It has the tools. You have the tools. You have the resources to do it. And like I said, for exercise, you don't need anything, to be honest. From aerobic or strength training, you really don't need anything. For food, you might need some tools. For stress management, again, you don't need much. For sleep, you might need some tools. So figure out if you need the tools for the specific things to increase the likelihood of success. Again, it comes down to success, because once you create success in that, now dopamine is primed. Dopamine doesn't care about your outcome, because once you reach the outcome, the dopamine goes down again. Now you have to create another platform. So now you go to the next one and to the next one. And I always say, and this affects not just your physical health, the emotional health, it helps. And I'm writing a whole chapter on this. I say that the ship of emotion is moved by the tugboats of small behaviors, or the ship of serotonin. I'm simplifying serotonin. It's more than that. The ship of serotonin is moved best by the small tugboats of dopamine release. And if you achieve behaviors that are tugboated in a particular direction, it's more powerful than any drug. It's more powerful than, and I'm not even one of those lifestyle doctors that is against drugs, like throw everything out with the baby with the bathwater. No, they have their place. But if you do it this way, where the tugboats of behavior, small,
Mhm.
achievable, measurable, time-bound, resourced behavior, push towards achievement, over time, this becomes the most powerful mood enhancer. This becomes the most powerful mood stabilizer, which is actually a book chapter, a very novel chapter that I'm writing. So I'll share with you guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Dean. Wonderful. Okay, a lot of people in our audience, or at least some, are in a caregiving role with somebody who is in cognitive decline and are probably curious whether diet and lifestyle may be beneficial, but may struggle actually with enrolling their caregivee in those changes because their caregiving may or may not have the ability to understand or get enrolled with changes like that. Do you recommend that caregivers who are caring for somebody in cognitive decline try to engage in whatever diet or lifestyle changes they can? And do you have any tips on how to elicit cooperation or
Yeah, yeah.
collaboration?
So that's a very complicated question. Coming from a person that's seen nearly 20,000 patients over 20 years or so, it's a complicated question, but it's a very important one. Thank you for asking that. It To me, autonomy is the most important thing. Autonomy, not once somebody has dementia, but autonomy meaning that whatever they would have felt when they didn't have fulminant dementia. If you think that this person would not have wanted to go through this level of change. Now, change is one of the most complicated things we do. Much of the strife we see in society around us, everything is about the fact that there's a resistance to change for all of us. For all of us, me included. That's the one battle I lead every day. It's the inertia. I call it limbic inertia. That's another. The inertia that we experience when we want to change is profound. So how do you bring about change if the person themselves are fully in it, if this is something of their desire, and the outcome is something of their desire? And that's a calculus that everybody has to do with themselves. We actually had two separate situations in our household. Let me tell you my story. One grandparent we knew was a very proactive person and would have wanted all of this. By the time we found out they had dementia, they couldn't make the decisions fully for themselves. So assuming that they were a very proactive person and they would have wanted, we kind of instituted as much of the changes without creating too much harm. The other one we knew did not want much of a change. I had even talked about, if I have cancer, don't institute chemotherapy and all of this stuff. And that's as good a decision as any because it's their decision. And at that point, we knew that all these changes, and there are significant changes. We're talking about diet completely changing, for example, or changing to some extent. Exercise programs, let's say if they've never exercised, all of a sudden doing meaningful exercise to have an effect. Sleep hygiene or wearing CPAP machine, which is important because people who have sleep apnea, in some series have shown that people who have sleep apnea that are untreated, they have their chance of dementia goes up by 70%. And if they have dementia, probably even higher. So, or faster. So in that case, this is a complicated device. It's a difficult device. It takes a while to get used to putting that on. Mental activity around things that they're contrived and out of normal for them, or they didn't want to do any of this stuff. So you have to do the calculus. It really, I don't know if I'm a good person for these talks. I don't give 1, 2, 3 answers because I don't think life needs to be 1, 2, 3 things for health. But you have to do that calculus with your family. And if the person is willing and was willing, then start with the simplest thing that they could have done and they can do. A walk with them, a little brisk walk every day. Start with 10 minutes, 15 minutes. That's the easiest one. Reducing sugars and fatty food from the diet. And that's going to have a profound effect. Increasing greens. We know the superpower of greens. I never talk about superfoods, but if there is one, it's greens. So adding that in smoothies and among the food, those are the little things you can do. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. What about alcohol? We hear some people saying a glass of wine is linked to better health outcome. Other folks saying no no alcohol is the best amount to consume. What's your take, especially from a brain health perspective?
So this is where we lose a lot of our friends. But I'll start with my own story. I'm not a big fan of alcohol, but I drink a glass of wine here and there. To be honest, not even. I'll be honest. I'll probably hold it and sip it, but I don't create science around my hypocrisy. So it's critical that we say that the amount of alcohol that's been shown in really important, validated studies that's good for the brain is 0. Yeah. Now, if you drink a glass here and there, I'm sure it's not going to do damage. It depends on where your evolution is. If you have dementia, it's probably going to do more damage. If you have mild cognitive impairment, probably more damage. But when you're younger, not. But don't think that it's definitely not a health food. If there is any health associations with it, it's a paraphenomenon. It's a confound of conviviality, of public presence, people who are more social activity. So it's in spite of alcohol, and it's the fact that they actually tend to be in social settings. So if you can do the social settings, if you can be more convivial, more jovial, more involved without alcohol, it's better. And if you want your one glass here and there, I'm not going to hold it against you, or you shouldn't hold it against yourself. There shouldn't be any guilt, but that's the science.
Thanks, Dean. What about the Alzheimer drugs that are on the market right now? Yeah. There's a number of them that have been approved in recent years. Do any of them have efficacy?
We're very hopeful. We're very supportive of research in Alzheimer's, even molecular research. Not so much animal research, because 400 drugs have been studied in mice, and 0 of them have worked on humans. Mice do not men make. Mice are not representative in any way of human disease or outcome. But human studies, we definitely think that, and cellular studies as a starting point to then translate it into humans, we're very supportive. We don't think that there will be one drug that will actually cure Alzheimer's, because we think Alzheimer's is a multifaceted disease. We know it's a multifaceted: inflammation, oxidation, insulin resistance, glucose dysregulation, lipid dysregulation, traumatic micro injuries and big injuries, and all of these things. But I think they're going to help to some extent. The drugs that have worked, 2 of them have shown some efficacy. One of them had more side effects, and the efficacy was smaller. The second one, and these are the MAB drugs, meaning the antibodies against amyloid, had demonstrated a 27% reduction in prevalence of, in progression, not even reversing, and slowing down of the disease by 27%. The side effects were less. The comparison groups as far as deaths were pretty similar, but as far as the 2 side effects, which is microbleeds and swelling, it was not as bad. There were some cases. Again, the cost is pretty expensive. Mm-hmm. The outcome is minimal. I think it's a great first start. I don't think it's going to be a cure, but it might be helpful as a slowing process. But it cannot. I don't think that it can serve as a reversal drug or treatment drug, especially without early interventions.
Yeah, thank you. Really comes back to, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or maybe in this case, a ton of cure, really.
A ton of cure.
Let's move to some of the questions from Whole Life Club members. Judy asked, do you recommend hormone replacement therapy, such as estradiol, for dementia prevention?
We just did a whole podcast on this. Shameless plug, Brain Health Revolution podcast. We talked about this. It's a complicated topic, and it's a very, very important topic. I'll preface it by saying it's a shame that the population that has 2/3 of Alzheimer's are in women, and 2/3 of caregivers are women, and the population that has been least studied is women. The least amount of money is in women's research. It should be, because it's going to help the men as well, because it's the same underpinning mechanisms pretty much. The hormone story is complicated. It has to do more with nuance and timing and dosing and combination therapy, whether progesterone and estrogen. The one study recently came back and demonstrated some kind of dire relationship, which we don't believe, because we think that was not as strong a data, because other data shows that hormone therapy, especially proximal to the time of transition, to the time where people are going through menopause, seems to be beneficial. Mm-hmm. There are many studies that show that. Again, we need more data to. But at this point, I think the therapy is still warranted, especially under the supervision of your doctor. And those who are going through menopause or in that window should definitely quickly talk to their physicians. Make sure that the physicians are knowledgeable about data, because they're not always that knowledgeable about this. So ask them in a way where you put them under a little bit of stress. Don't worry, that's your job. And ask them about the latest research. If they don't know about the latest research, educate them or push them to get educated, because it's critical that they make decisions in lieu of the latest data. And then thirdly, be advocates. Push NIH, push State Department, push others to put, not State Department, and HHS and others, to put money into women's brain health research, which actually we are doing as well in our work.
Yeah, thank you. Next up is a big one, and it kind of goes to everything in a way. But Judith asked, what can you do to improve brain fog and improve your brain? So let's focus here particularly on mental clarity in the here and now, which ultimately isn't that different from prevention of Alzheimer's later, but let's focus there.
It's such an important and great question. It's a common phenomenon. And this brain fog, which is which can be defined. Definitions are everything, isn't it? And we as humans, our greatest revolution has been language. Language is the foundation of consciousness. Language is what has grown our consciousness. Yes, grown our consciousness as a species. But we still have a lot of work in definitions and words. And one of the complicated terms is brain fog. And it's an important one to distill. Is brain fog, and with the right doctor, is brain fog something that's about confusion or lack of attention or loss of focus or focus that ebbs quickly to other things? Or is it lightheadedness? Any of these have to be better defined because they all take you a different path. But I will assume that it means that loss of focus that can't stay around the topic and you lose yourself. And this is a very common phenomenon. It could be as a result of many things, starting with B12 deficiency, vitamin D deficiency, thyroid disorder, very common one, especially as we get older. Hormonal aberrancies and abnormalities, sleep disorders, extremely common one. Even people that think that they don't have sleep disorders. If you don't have sleep apnea, you can have restless leg syndrome that actually moves you and doesn't allow you to go to the deeper levels of sleep. Very common reason. And ironically, the least common one, which most people think is the most common, is a viral phenomenon. But it's something that should be in the list that the doctor, once they've ruled out the common things, that should be looked into as a last resort, because that involves doing lumbar puncture and doing all kinds of studies, and the yield is often very low. But that should be looked into as well. But many metabolic and vitamin and endocrine disorders can cause this brain fog. And the common ones are the ones I told you about, which is vitamin deficiencies, thyroid deficiency, and sleep disorders are very common.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you mentioned sleep disorders, and we've had a number of questions about sleep. Beverly said, thank you for your work. I have your two wonderful books and refer to them often. She said, I'm working hard on sleep hygiene. What's an adequate amount of deep and REM sleep each night? She said, my Fitbit tells me I'm getting about 40 minutes of deep sleep and 18% REM sleep. I know the device isn't really accurate, but still I worry.
So you're supposed to go through 4 to 5 of the cycles, and each of the cycle includes N1, N2, N3, and then REM sleep, repetitive eye movements. And you need to get into the deeper stages and REM sleep. Many people actually sleep and they're not aware that they woke up, but they never get to the deeper sleep. One example of that is alcohol. Alcohol will knock you out, but it will also affect your relationship with the deeper levels of sleep, which is critical for cleansing the brain and basically consolidating memories and thoughts. The cleansing part is just a remarkable research world of research. The brain actually shrinks at night, especially during the deeper stages of sleep. The flow of lymph and fluid through the brain becomes accelerated. The glial cells, which outnumber the neurons by 9 to 1, but specific one, which is not one of those glial cells, starts working and cleaning all the brain. It's just remarkable how much work it does. And then the brain actually then, in computer science, it's defragging, reorganizes elements of the memory and thought into the right file folder and cabinet. Look at all the work. In fact, the reason you sleep is to preserve your brain. There is no other reason. Once the brain or glia, let's say the organisms were very small, as they became bigger and bigger, they evolved into bigger, they get to a size where now this little glial ball needs some respite because it's using a lot of energy. That's where sleep evolved. Sleep is not a wise evolutionary choice, but it's wiser than the alternative, which is the brain dying. So that's the importance of sleep. So you need to invest in sleep hygiene. You need to make sure that it's going to the deeper stages. You're right that Fitbits and all of these tools are not the best tools, but if you're not moving, it's actually telling you you're paralyzed, which is actually tells you indirectly that you're in the deeper stages. It can't tell you more than that. They're extrapolating with the data. We're getting there pretty soon, maybe especially with some devices that looks at EEGs. But at this point, make sure that you get 7 to 8 hours of deep restorative sleep. Now, if you're getting 7 to 8 hours and you're still tired during the day or foggy, then you need a sleep study. Because sleep study, they connect you with the EEGs, they connect you with the respiratory devices, with the pulse ox and all, and they capture so much data, not just about movement, but the depth and the type of sleep waves, from the kappa waves to the alpha waves to the spindle waves, all these waves that actually tell you which stages you've gone into. Deep data, which is incredibly helpful. And that would be what I would suggest.
So if somebody is sleeping at least 7 hours a night to as far as their consciousness, like the experience, like forgetting, like just going to sleep, and then they have 7 hours between then and when they experience waking up, and their Fitbit says they got, whatever it was, 40 minutes of deep sleep in that time, but they feel okay. Would you be concerned, or would you say, okay, Fitbit is pretty imprecise. If you're doing the right things and you weren't on alcohol, you're probably fine?
Yeah, I think I would be okay if you're feeling good, if you're feeling energized. One element is somebody like me. I'm a pretty type A personality, highly driven. I'm not aware of my own fatigue sometimes. And that's a very important point to make. Because I'll be very transparent, I'm having shoulder problems. Indiscretions of youth are catching up to me now. So I'm going to need a shoulder surgery. It's affecting my sleep. It's affecting the depth of sleep, the pain. But during the day, I know my sleep was not proper. I know that my sleep was affected. But during the day, I'm not feeling it. It's not that I'm getting good sleep, but I'm such a driven person that I'm overdriving the fatigue. So be a little more self-conscious about that state that you're experiencing. And if you even suspect a bit that your sleep might be altered, I truly think, and by the way, I have no relationship with any sleep devices, any sleep studies, any sleep doctors, but I think it's a very valuable tool to use or resource to use to at least get a normal baseline of your sleep architecture.
Thank you. Beverly asked also about light boxes, which are sometimes used, especially potentially to combat depression in the wintertime. Any thoughts on whether they have efficacy?
Move to California. No, I'm just kidding. No, to where it's ocean and we live. No, I'm joking. Everywhere is great. I lived in Pittsburgh and loved it. Sometimes light boxes are needed. There's much studies that have shown the efficacy of it. This is not one of those gimmicks. It is actually efficacious and useful. Make sure that it's the right type. And they're very helpful with mood and sleep as well. Another thing to do is, it might not be applicable to you, but I love this as our first habit, first thing we do with our community, with our teams, everything, is an early morning walk outside in the light. It resets your melatonin. It resets your cortisol cycle. It resets your state of mood. It gets you the right amount of sun at the right peak so that you're getting vitamin D. There's literally not much you can do that's more effective than an early morning walk. And also, it primes you for a healthy day the rest of the day, because now if you've done, let's say, 20, 30, 40-minute walk, you're less likely to eat sugary or fatty food. So across the board, that's a great thing, aside from the light box, which I'm definitely, if you think that if that's something you need, it's useful.
Thank you. Lisa said if the Mind, Dash, and Mediterranean diets can help to prevent and mitigate dementia, would a whole foods plant-based diet deliver even better outcomes?
We think so. There's definitely evidence, and the evidence. The reason we went from UCSD and Aisha from Columbia was to Loma Linda was because to study plant-based diets. And one study we did, which was published as an abstract, which showed that people who are whole food plant-based versus vegetarian versus pescatarian versus omnivores, and their cognitive state as measured against a very good cognitive tool, CVLT, just in that order. The whole food plant-based people did best, then the vegetarians, then the pescatarians, then the omnivores. And the same kind of data has been shown over and over again in other studies. The more whole food plant-based you go. Now, I have a little bit problem with the whole food world, which I do not like rigidity for the sake of rigidity. Again, some people might get unhappy about this, but the olive oil story, the data, a little bit of olive oil has not been shown to be harmful. If you're going to extrapolate, that's a separate thing. Extrapolation, I can extrapolate from aluminum to super brain food with all kinds of contortions, but the reality is that. And then the other thing that I want to make sure is that everybody's not at a point where they can jump to whole food plant-based. There must, for some people, for a lot of people, for a great number of people, and we are the only ones that do population-based studies. We won this is not boasting, but a little bit, but we won the National Academy of Medicine Award for our work in the African-American communities and other communities, because we didn't just go whole hog, no cheese, no butter, no salt, no milk, no fish, no this, no that. They said, no Sherzai. We say, where is the opportunity where we can add 10% health? But measurably and achievably and specifically. And then you slowly increase that way. That should be your journey. Because otherwise we're going to create patterns of failure, which are going to actually lose people for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say we can't make the perfect the enemy of the good.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. John asked, is Parkinson's disease considered a neurological disorder? And are the methods to reduce risk of developing PD similar to consistent with those that are helpful in preventing dementia?
It is a degenerative disease. I did, like I said, I did 2 years of work on Parkinson's and other Parkinsonian type of diseases in IH. We have a review paper in PubMed that you can read, nutrition and micronutrients and Parkinson's, that you can read. I'll put in Sherzai and that title. And Parkinson's is a very common neurodegenerative disease that involves dopamine specifically. Later, it starts involving other neurotransmitters and other parts of the brain as well. But initially, one part of the brain called substantia nigra. By the way, dopamine is only 0.5% of all the neurotransmitters in the brain, but that's how powerful it is. It involves movement and involves motivation, or I'm overstating the term motivation, inclination towards a behavior. And when it starts affecting those cells, by the time a person knows that they have this first symptoms, which is usually a pill rolling tremor, or a little, what they call march petit en pas, or festinating gaits, or these balance problems, or masked faces, by then, even the beginnings of it, 80% of the substantia nigra has been lost. We know that some things, the same lifestyle factors are involved in that, but there are some other things as well. There's a little bit of more of a genetic component, but a different kind of genetic component as well. There is some evidence, and usually I don't jump to this evidence, but on this case, as far as pesticides, there seems to be a relation between pesticides and Parkinson's. We haven't clearly delineated that relationship, but we know that there is one. And we also know that insulin resistance and Parkinson's is very intricately related. When we were directors of brain health at Cedars-Sinai, we did a research on insulin resistance and treatment of insulin resistance, even in early stages of insulin resistance and Parkinson's, that it significantly affected the disease process. So the same kind of things, again, lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, and all of those things. It is a degenerative disease. It's a progressively degenerative disease. It involves more men. It actually progresses over a longer period of time. There are acute cases. There are more rapid cases, but there are more aggressive, called progressive supranuclear palsy and others. But it's a devastating disease that also has cognitive component. When the cognitive component, I'm going to be labored, is aggressive at the beginning, it's called Lewy body disease. When it's not, it's Parkinson's alone.
Got it. Thank you. This is an interesting question. Shelley said, which actions and lifestyles make the most difference? For example, learning a new language, meditating, or exercising. What's most important?
Yes. The answer is whichever one you can start with and succeed with the most. I really mean that. This is not an offhand, trite little statement. It is. We need to create successful first behaviors because we can build on that. The ones that we start with on the nutrition side is add greens. We don't even take away things first. Add greens, 1 or 2 servings a day. And then we start slowly taking away sugar a little bit, but in a measurable way. We definitely start taking away saturated fat, like, for example, processed meats and things of that nature. As far as exercise, walking, brisk walking in place, or in a neighborhood that's safe, or something like that, definitely a brisk walk would be important. As far as sleep, it's important. Patterns. Your brain is the number one pattern detector. There are 2 aspects of the brain: pattern detection and change. The frontal lobe and then the rest of the brain, which is pattern recognition. Go to bed the same time, wake up the same time, and no phone and computer or anything at least half an hour, and don't eat an hour before sleep. Those 3 things for sleep are profoundly important. We can add so much more. And then as far as mental activity, don't retire, rewire, find a passion and start delving into that. An hour a day, an hour and a half a day. Find 2 passions: guitar and dancing, new language, book club, volunteering. These things matter because they actually are the foundation of joy in life. So all of those are the basic foundational things we built around. But you have to find which ones are yours at the core.
Don't retire, rewire. I think I see a bumper sticker.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. I think I would add one other piece to that, which is complementary, which is that sometimes the weakest link in the chain is where you get the most bang for the buck, so to speak. Yeah. For example, if you're exercising pretty well and you're sleeping pretty well and you've got loving connections and you're stimulating your brain in creative ways, but your diet is all French fries and Twinkies, that's probably rather than improving your exercise regimen a little more, focus on that, the weakest link in the chain, so to speak, in your whole lifestyle medicine portfolio. So there's some combination of that with where you can get wins and success and make progress.
Yes. Yeah. And you would replace the French fries with?
Well, you might start with some baked potatoes, or as you're saying, get some greens too, right? If you're really starting basic, have some steamed kale alongside, or eat the steamed kale first, and you may find that you're not as drawn to the French fries at all. One step at a time, right? Yeah.
I love it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Barbara said, I have a friend who has become paleo. This strikes me as a poor move for brain health and for other chronic conditions. What's your feedback on this nutrition style move?
So you'll hear lots of these fringe diets, and they're interesting. So it catches people's brains, and they're aligned with their prior proclivity, so it catches people. And it's unusual enough to say, if it's unusual, you need an unusual. We have linguistic fallacy, which is the unusual must take care of the unusual. No, it doesn't. So with paleo, that's just one of them. Keto, paleo, South Beach, the list goes on and on and on. The amount of data. I mean, I just want to one day just list the amount of data that is supportive of a plant predominant, if not plant only diet is so massive that it's bewildering compared to the one-off data that comes out. The paleo data is wrong at so many levels. It assumes that paleo people lived long enough where chronic diseases mattered. It didn't. People didn't live long enough. Some people did, but majority didn't live long enough. And I was the Secretary of Health, the Minister of Health of a country that was in a third world country that was in those kind of states. And we knew what killed people. It's not going to help people to eat meat and paleo diet as they think. The second thing is they actually have a misconception of paleo diet. The bone and the feces diet, the data gives us completely different picture of the fact that we were not so much hunter-gatherers, we were gatherers then hunters, So that's the other thing. Just if you're not, go hunting with a bow and arrow, let's see what happens. And well, don't go, but that's it. And so the paleo diet, I think, is just one of, and the data is even more important. We're data driven, is just absolutely abysmal. We looked at keto diet and all of the data on that and cognition. And you would think the fact that the amount of information, the amount of marketing on keto is so massive that I've never been to an airport without actually turning to a store and not seeing a keto article. That's just remarkable. But so we looked at the data as researchers on keto and cognition. There were no studies that were more than 6 months of meaningful outcome. There were no studies that had more than 37 people of meaningful outcome. And the outcomes were never clinically meaningful. I mean, so it begs the question, how is it possible that the paucity of data that you see here would manifest in such an incredible marketing campaign? So Go with what works. The whole food plant-based or plant predominant works massively. The Mind diet, which actually the recent paper came out that negating it, we did the review on that paper. And it is one of the weakest papers we've ever seen. And we tell you why it is. It's not like we're affirming our bias. We're not about that. We're showing the data. But the majority of the data on Mind diet shows that 53% of dementia is averted. 53%. And why? Because it's plant predominance.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Last question here from our Whole Life Club member. Stephanie said, please help me understand why I crave sweets, honey, and maple syrup. I try to stay away from white sugar, but I've had these cravings my whole life. How does that work in the brain?
Yeah, sugar and fat, it might manifest in different ways for different people, in different foods for different people, but those are addiction. Those are programmed survival foods. Those are the sympathetic survival foods. Imagine yourself at 10,000 years ago, where, forget about that, 200 years ago, people would have difficulty getting their hand in enough calories in a day. So survival was of utmost importance, not thriving past age 70 and 80. You were supposed to survive long enough to reproduce and die. I don't mean that in a negative way, but but it is the truth.
Sure.
And so survival was an addiction mechanism, and everything is primed towards sugar and fat. And that's why a lot of these studies, when you look at them, the paleo and keto and others, their questionnaires are subjective. How do you feel? How do you think I'm going to feel if I'm going to have a lot of chocolate? Sugar-filled chocolate. How do you think I'm going to feel if I'm going to have bacon and meat, and especially if that was what I wanted to believe to be good and what I wanted to have? I'm going to feel good because the feeling is superficial. How I'm going to feel later, that's cognitive decline, is not going to manifest in that questionnaire. Mm-hmm. So these are addictive foods that we have to, fight the evolutionary urge for them. That's the reality.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sweets give a fast burst of energy, which gives the brain an instant reward for consuming that food. It's instantly getting energy, right? Yeah. Very fast. Yeah. But we have to, in some sense, become more, we have to evolve our understanding of motivations away from that instant hit to a deeper, the way I put it is, what if we ask not what do I want now, but what do I want most?
Yes, exactly.
And when we're from that standpoint, maybe right now I want that nice taste and that quick hit in the brain. But what I want most is vitality and energy. I'm thriving and to fall in love with foods that love me back, and to know that I'm taking care of my body, and to have the energy to play with my kids all day long and do the things I cherish. And that's a much deeper motivation. But it Absolutely. Does take a rewiring of our brain to get that understanding.
Yeah. But that's such a beautiful thing. And we're not used to that. Actually, we're not designed for that long-term perspective. And we have to, I want to take a second here. If there's anything that we need to kind of codify, maybe even on your walls, but definitely maybe on your wrist, is like, my goal is for thriving, for long-term. So that it becomes an instinct, as opposed to a slogan that you have to draw every time, or ad hoc, or sometimes you forget it. It has to be present in some way. And then after a while, it becomes you. It becomes identity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Dean, last question I want to ask you is you've written with Aisha 2 extraordinary books, The Alzheimer Solution and The 30-Day Alzheimer Solution. You mentioned earlier that maybe you might be working on a next book. Can you give us a sneak peek of what the topic might be?
Yes, we're so proud. Actually, just this week was the cleaning up of the thoughts and the writings, and it's much bigger. I'm not putting down the first 2 books, but it's about a whole brain and all life and vitality of the brain, the true capacity of the brain, but without the bombast. And it doesn't have to be bombastic. We truly want to show people the immense capacity that exists in the brain. The 87 billion neurons, 1 quadrillion connections were not meant to just watch a show. And I don't mean not even putting that down. We were watching a show, but what it can do as far as vitality and joy and creativity and experience and getting beyond the fog and beyond just the normal awareness to the higher state of awareness. It's just an amazing capacity that we're really not harnessing. And it's going to take a little bit of jujitsu to truly achieve it. It has some really novel, different approaches that I think anybody has approached before, and I'm hoping that everybody will love it. But it's a different level book for us, and we are very proud of it.
All right. Well, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's very excited to read it. We've been talking with Dr. Dean Sherzai, brilliant neurologist, a best-selling author, innovator, and leader in the lifestyle medicine movement. And Dean, thank you for being not just a friend to me, a friend to the food revolution movement, but a friend to all of life. On behalf of all of our minds and all of our loved ones, we thank you for your leadership, your wisdom, and your partnership in this revolution, and for joining us today.
Thank you so much. We love you, and we love the whole audience, and we're here to serve, and we're here for you.
When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club.